Okay. Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء مرضات الله ووجهه وثوابه وقربه. اللهم افتح علينا بحكمتك وانشر علينا برحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. يا عليم علمنا من علمك ما ترضى به عنا ولا تؤاخذنا بما تعلمه منا. يا حليم خلقنا بخلق حلم وحققنا بحقائق العلم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. وصلى الله على سيدنا Muhammad. So up to this point, alhamdulillah, we've covered 3 out of the 4 great imams. We starting from before Ramadan. So we covered the life of Imam Abu Hanifa, then we covered the life of Imam Malik, and then Imam al-Shafi'i, and tonight we're on Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal. And these 4 imams are particularly important to focus on, even though we are blessed to be part of a history that has a large number of imams. Part of the reason the 4 imams are so important is because of their historic widespread acceptance of their schools in different areas around the Muslim lands, but also because of the amazingness of their lives and in the most basic way. And for those who have been here before, you know that we have not been focusing on the fiqh of these imams. So of course one could spend time talking about Abu Hanifa, Shafi'i, Malik, Ahmed, and their methodology and their opinions and comparing those. But the idea has been more to spend time on the imam themselves and their life, their history, their qualities, their characteristics, and how those things play into and affect who they were. And also, we can obviously take lessons from that as well. And this is extremely important because oftentimes we find ourselves, although surrounded by people, feeling that there is no one that we can relate to. And biographies are extremely important in that regard because they give us role models that we can look up to, and they give us people who we can see that face things that oftentimes are much greater than what we can even imagine. And we also see people who came from oftentimes very humble upbringing and achieved amazing and great things by the will of Allah the Most High. So we saw, for example, in the case of Imam al-Shafi'i, that Imam al-Shafi'i was an orphan and that he didn't have much. And yet he was able to attain what he attained in the realm of scholarship and knowledge and inshallah position in the hereafter. Imam Ahmed, it was said about him by Abu Thawr. Abu Thawr was also a great scholar of that time. He said if anyone were to say that Ahmed ibn Hanbal was one of the people of the garden, he would not be rebuked for that. For if you went to Khurasan, you would hear people say Ahmed ibn Hanbal is a righteous man. The same is true if you went to Syria. They would say Ahmed ibn Hanbal is a righteous man. The same would apply if you went to Iraq. They would say Ahmed ibn Hanbal is a righteous man. So there is consensus on this, is what he's saying. That no one would argue that Imam Ahmed was a person of great integrity and a person of great knowledge and a person of great status. They say that he's Imam of Ahl Sunnah because it was by the stance that he took that the position of Ahl Sunnah on the Quran in theology was affirmed and preserved, when, as we will see, pretty much everyone else wasn't able to get past that test. So Imam Ahmed was abused under the rule of Al-Ma'mun, which we'll talk about more. Then he was abused under the rule of Al-Mu'tasim. Then he was confined under the rule of Al-Wathiq. And it wasn't until the rule of Al-Mutawakkil that he was let free again. So literally he was oppressed by 3 different rulers in his time. And still he was able to accomplish what he was able to accomplish, and he was really, really a great figure. So he was born in 164 after Hijrah, and he died in 241. 164 to 241. We mentioned before that Abu Hanifa was from 80 to 150, and Malik was in the similar time. Shafi'i was born in 150, the year that Abu Hanifa died, and Imam Ahmed was born in 164 and lived to 241. As we know, one of the signs of the righteousness and the goodness of someone's life is how many people pray on them. And this is one of the things that all of us hope for, that we can have such an impact on other people's lives and be beloved to other people such that they would want to and rush to pray on us when it is our time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us that honor. And they say that there were no fewer than 300,000 people who were at the janazah of Imam Ahmed. Now you have to think about this in a pre-modern context. If 300,000 people prayed on someone today, it would be significant in a major city. We're talking about in Baghdad at that time. It was a very incredible sight, 300,000 people. And that was in Baghdad where he died. He was also born in Baghdad, and his mother was pregnant when she arrived from Marw, and she gave birth to him in Baghdad. And he was on his mother's and his father's side of pure Arab descent. And he lived there, and he gained knowledge. His father died when he was a child, and he was not known to have ever seen his grandparents, but his father was after he was born. And they say that even from a young age he was very scrupulous. This is one of the things we see about Imam Ahmed, that he was very particular about behaviors, and that it seems that his uncles used to work in basically news delivery. So information would come from other areas of the Khilafah, and the uncles would deliver the news. So it's said that one time one of the governors, he came and he said on one occasion the news of Baghdad was slow in arriving. So this governor, they went to ask Ahmed's uncle, what happened to this? Did you not convey the news? I wanted to review it and send it to the Khalifa. He said, yes. He said, what happened? He said, I gave it to Ahmed to deliver it. The small boy, Ahmed ibn Hanbal as a small boy, I gave him this to deliver it. It seems it wasn't the greatest of news. So they went to him, they asked him, what happened? Why didn't you convey it? He said, am I the type of person that would forward such information? I threw it in the river. Imam Ahmed as a child, right? So the news wasn't good news. He got the news, and he was the one who's supposed to deliver it. He just went, he threw it in the river. He's like, I don't deliver this kind of news. So he was a person who was very, particular about the kinds of things that he was involved in. And he was a person who had, obviously, a very strong personality. He used to mix with all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds. He says that when he was young, that he used to frequent the scribes, and then I went to the government offices when I was 14. So from a young age, he was around different areas, and he was exposed to different things. And he was initially exposed to the people of Ra'i. So in Muslim history, you have 2 major camps in the early period. You have the people of deduction or opinion and juristic opinion, and then you have the people of hadith. And early on, Imam Ahmed actually studied with the Qadi Abu Yusuf, who was the top student of Abu Hanifa. So we saw also in some of the other imams how there's a lot of overlap between people's lives. So it said that one of the first people he studied with was Abu Yusuf. And he said the first thing I wrote was the hadith of Abu Yusuf. So he used to write that down, and he used to study that. He had knowledge of it, and then he decided to take a different approach, which was one that was more hadith heavy. So he started his hadith study in Baghdad, obviously, because that's where he was. And it says that he really started that in a serious way in 179. So at this point he was what? How many years old? 15 years old. So this point is when he got really serious about his study of hadith. He had already started with Qadi Abu Yusuf. Now he's saying, I want to go into hadith. He goes into hadith at the age of 15. And it says he took up this study in Baghdad, and he went to the mashayikh that he could go to, and this lasted until 186. And 186 is when he started to travel. So at this point he's, about 22. He's in his early 20s. He starts to travel to different places, and he starts to take knowledge from different places. He went basically everywhere in the end, but he went to Basra, he went to Hijaz, he went to Yemen, he went to Kufa. He wanted to go to Ray, which is even eastern, even more. And, all of these places he wanted to go as much as he could so that he can get the hadith straight from the mouth of people. That the more direct access he can have to the people of hadith, he would get it. And he was known for writing everything down. He would write everything down, and he was very simple in the way that he would live his life. So he says, for example, himself, he says, I performed 5 hajj, 3 of them I performed on foot. This is a statement of Imam. He said, I performed 5 hajj, 3 of them on foot. I spent 30 dirhams on one of them. I got lost on the way of one of them while I was on foot, and I began to say, O slaves of Allah, show me the way, until I found it. And he would walk to hajj because he wanted to actually go through greater difficulty in the hajj so that he could get more reward. So he was a very, very tough person. He also didn't really have a whole lot of money. He wasn't known to be extremely wealthy, so he would go however he would go. He also, they say at one time he had the intention, after completing his hajj in 198, he had the intention to visit Abdul Razak in Sana'a. Abdul Razak al-San'ani, one of the early great hadith scholars. And it says that they were in hajj, and he was with Yahya ibn Ma'in. So Yahya ibn Ma'in was another very famous hadith scholar at that time, and him and Ahmed were companions. It says they were in hajj together, and Ahmed mentions to Yahya, he tells him, I have the intention after hajj, I'm going to travel to Yemen so that I can meet Abdul Razak and take the hadith from him. He tells him this intention. And then they're in there and they're performing tawaf. And at the same time that they're performing tawaf, Abdul Razak comes in to perform tawaf. Okay? So at the same time, Yahya ibn Ma'in sees him and he recognizes him. So he greets him, and then he tells him, this is Ahmed ibn Hanbal. So Yahya ibn Ma'in introduces Imam Ahmed to Abdul Razak. Then Abdul Razak says, may Allah give him long life and make him thrive. I've heard good things about him. So he's already, the news of him has reached to this person. And then Yahya says, tomorrow inshallah we'll come to you and we'll record your hadith. So he tells him, tomorrow we're going to go to you. And then Ahmed asks him, why did you make an appointment? He said, so we can listen to him. And then he tells him, Allah has spared you a month's journey each way and the expense involved. So what Yahya is telling Imam Ahmed is, look, you had the intention to go study with this person and get the hadith from him directly. Because especially in this early period, they want the chain of narration to be as direct as possible. So he could get the hadith probably from one of his students or someone else, right? But if he wants to get it directly from him, then he has to go to him. So he tells him, I have this intention, then he appears in the tawaf. He tells him, Allah spared you this journey and the money that it costs. And then Imam Ahmed says, he's kind of like, why did you even make an appointment with him? Like, I had the niyyah to go to him. You didn't need to make the appointment with him here. I had the niyyah, I was going to go to him. He's like, Allah saved you the journey. So they met with him, he took the hadith from him. And then Imam Ahmed went to Yemen afterwards. He still went, right? I'm still going to go. And he went with him back to Yemen. He took the knowledge from him there. He continued to study with him and spend time to him. When he got to Sana'a, and he was on the way, he ran out of money. He was intending to go there. He was on his way. He ran out of money. And people were trying to help him, and he refused to take money from them. And what he would do is he would work as a porter. So he would basically carry people's stuff for them. Right? This is what he would do. He would carry people's stuff for them, and he would praise Allah that Allah gave him strength and He gave him energy and stuff, and he would carry it, and then he would use that money to live And even Abdul Razak himself tried to give money to Ahmed ibn Hanbal. And he said, here, take this money. We're not in a land where trading is easy and earning a living is easy and all of these things, so just take the money and you can use it. And Imam Ahmed said, I'm fine. And he stayed for 2 years like this, working and going through hardship and making a little bit of money and surviving and then studying, right? He kept doing this for 2 years. He lived like that. And he traveled all these different places, Yemen, everything. And they used to tell him, when he became older and he became very knowledgeable and well known, they used to tell him that you're an imam, you've reached this high level, and he used to say, Ma'al mahbara ila al-maqbara. Ma'al mahbara ila al-maqbara. He says, I'm with the ink until I get to my grave. I'm with my ink until I get to my grave. Meaning, don't tell me I'm an imam and all these things. I keep studying. I keep studying. I keep studying. I keep studying. This is the way of the people of knowledge. And he used to say himself, a man is a scholar as long as he seeks knowledge. When he thinks that he knows, he is ignorant. And he himself used to follow it. Even today, when you talk to people of knowledge, they won't tell you, I'm an alim. It's the irony of the whole thing. Everyone goes around calling all types of people alim. And if you talk to a person of knowledge themselves, they'll never tell you that they're an alim. You can find people 80 years old, been studying and writing their whole life, and they'll say, Ana talib ilm. Ana talib ilm. I'm nothing other than a student of knowledge. This is the journey that I'm on, and it keeps continuing. Imam Ahmed used to also have a very close relationship with Imam al-Shafi'i, and he took a lot of knowledge from him. So his emphasis was largely on hadith, and his emphasis was largely on narrations. That he would record the hadith, he would record the fatwa of the Sahaba, and he would record the opinions of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een. And then he also studied fiqh and derivation and stuff with Imam al-Shafi'i, other scholars. But his thing was really narration. So much so that there are people in Islamic history who didn't even count him among the 4 imams. You'll see this sometimes, especially the Andalusian scholars. You'll see, for example, that Ibn Abdul Barr wrote a book on the imams. He calls it the Fuqaha al-Thalatha. That he says the 3 scholars, Abu Hanifa, Shafi'i, and Malik. He doesn't include Imam Ahmed. And there's others who didn't include Imam Ahmed also. Even in Ibn Rushd's Bidayat al-Mujtahid, he doesn't include the Hanbali school as much as the other ones. And certain works like Mawardi's Ahkam Sultaniya, it basically mentions the 3 madhabs and not the Hanbali school. And then you have Abu Ya'la, who's a Hanbali who also wrote Ahkam Sultaniya. Same title, same topic, and it's the Hanbali school. The Hanbali school is actually very vast. People mistake this. And what we do in the modern world is that we associate our interactions with people that we perceive to represent a madhab with the madhab. We make mistakes. So generally people will think that the Hanafi school is extremely rigid, because maybe they dealt with some Hanafis that are very rigid. But that doesn't mean that the school is. That just means that you dealt with some people that are rigid. Or in the case of the Hanbalis, people do the same thing. They'll think that the Hanbali school must be so rigid and stern and so on and so forth. They don't know. Actually, the school is extremely vast. Many times when you study comparative fiqh, you'll see, opinion 1 is like Hanafi and Shafi, and opinion 2 is Malik, and then it will be like, and the Hanbali school has 2 statements from Imam Ahmed. One agrees with the first and the other one agrees with the second. You see it over and over again. So the school is extremely vast. And part of that was that Imam Ahmed was very concerned about narration, and he used to like to give fatwa on the opinions of the Sahaba. So he gave fatwa on the Sahaba one time, he gave it on another Sahabi another time. And so he was very serious about his learning and very respectful of the people who came before him. Ibn al-Jawzi, he said, Ahmed did not set himself up to transmit hadith and give fatwa until he was 40 years old. Until he was 40 years old. He was born, we said, in 164, right? It says that it is reported that some people came to seek hadith from him in 203, and he refused to relate to them. In 203, he would have been 39. Right? 39. So he's not going to relate to them. And when he went to Abdul Razak in Yemen, he returned to Baghdad. He said they didn't do this. He didn't sit down to teach and all of these things until 204, when he was 40 years old. So why? When other scholars had done this before, Other scholars didn't wait until 40. So why did he wait until 40? They say one of the reasons was because he just didn't feel that his knowledge of hadith was exhaustive enough. That he needed to spend more time. He needed to spend more time. He needed to learn more. He needed to spend more time in taking the knowledge and not be in a rush. And this is one of the things also that we see. It's not usually actually the problem of the people of knowledge as much as it's the problem of the people. That people don't give students enough room to breathe. I remember when we went and we studied Arabic. We spent 9 months studying Arabic. Just think about this for a second. We spent 9 months studying Arabic. We came back, people are asking us questions about all kinds of things. Can you give a lecture on this? Can you give a lecture on that? What do you think? I'm like, I studied grammar. I've been gone 9 months, I studied grammar. I didn't study anything else. No fiqh, no hadith, no usul, no fatwa, like nothing. Don't ask me these questions, right? Then even later on, someone comes back. I used to joke with people that the College of Sharia is a very difficult college on the nafs. Because you go, and the thing you realize is that people who study the first portion of the Sharia, fiqh, halal and haram, they think they know a lot. So if they were to come back at that first point and people ask them questions, they'd answer all their questions. What is this? What did they say? Is this halal? Is this haram? They give answers and everything. But the person who studies more, they realize that they can't answer anything. And if they're going to answer something, they have to review it. Because this one might say this, and this one might say this, and so on. Right? So then what happens, you go and you spend years studying, and you come back, people ask you questions. First, I don't know. I'll look it up. I don't know. I'll look it up. I don't know. I'll look it up. It lasts for like 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, 1 year, until questions start to repeat themselves. So you come back, you feel like a fool. Right? This is how you see it often. And people are pushing you. Oh, you were gone all this time. What were you doing? Nothing? You don't know the answer to anything. People start talking, right? This is a fitna. Imam Ahmed, he didn't do anything. He started studying when he was 15. He didn't want to teach hadith. He didn't want to give fatwa until he was 40. And he was studying in the time that he was studying in, with the caliber of people that he was in. They said one of the reasons, because he wanted more time. The second reason, they said, because people there were more knowledgeable. They were still around. His teachers were still around. They could answer the questions. There's no need for me to say it. It's like the story we had with Imam Malik, that Zuhri came to him and his teacher one day, and he asked his teacher a question, and then he asked Malik, what do you say? And Malik's like, my teacher has told you already the answer. He kept asking him, he said, my teacher spoke, I don't have to say anything. He said, I came here because I want to hear your opinion, I'm not leaving until I hear it. Only then did Malik say his position on the issue, and it was different than his teacher's. But as long as his teacher was there, he doesn't need to talk, right? So Imam Ahmed until he was 40. We had one teacher of ours, he was the same way. Shaykh Zakaria Siddiqui, hafidhahullah. We said, Shaykh, like publications and stuff. He said, I haven't published anything. We said, really? He said, yeah, I've written things, but I haven't published them. We said, why? He said, because I'm not 40 yet. He said, Allah gave prophethood at 40. So one of the reasons also they say that about Imam Ahmed was that Imam Ahmed was strict to follow the sunnah in even the most detailed of things. So it says, for example, that when the Prophet ﷺ had cupping done, that he gave the person who did the cupping a dinar. So when Imam Ahmed would go and get cupping done, he would give the person a dinar. He was this serious about the sunnah. Said that he would travel at night because the Prophet ﷺ used to travel at night. So when the Prophet ﷺ doesn't receive the revelation until he's 40, Imam Ahmed says, I'm not teaching, I'm not giving fatwa, I'm not doing anything until I'm 40. This is the way that he did it. Rahimahullah ta'ala. There are some cases, that seem to indicate that he may have been asked a question, answered a question, he may have said something, but it wasn't official that he took this position. Even still, because of his piety and because of his knowledge and because of the esteem that his peers held him in, he was still well known even though he started teaching so late. And when he started teaching, he was already famous. This is basically, everyone already knew who he was. So when he started teaching, it was a big deal. And they say that actually the number of people that used to attend his class were 5,000 people. That 5,000, you think about this too, this is pre-microphone. Think about the discipline of people. Before the microphone, this is how they would sit. They just line up, they sit. He teaches, someone will repeat it. Someone repeat it. Someone repeat it. They were a lot better at telephone than us. People were disciplined. They would repeat it. They repeat it till it goes all the way back, right? They say in the gatherings of Imam Ahmed where 5,000 people were attending, only 500 were writing. This is also something to think about, interestingly, about culture. Look at what must have been the culture of the time. The 5,000 people are attending, only 500 are writing. That means only 500-ish are actual students. Everyone else is just coming to see Imam Ahmed. They used to say, we go to this circle of Imam Ahmed, we learn min dallihi wa samtihi. Like we learn from him the way he carries himself, the way he holds himself, the way he speaks to people, the way he teaches. We look at him and we learn from him. Most of the people were coming actually for that, for the experience of watching him teach. And this wasn't wa'ath. This is something else we don't realize. Like when we say watching him teach, we mean he's sitting with the book of hadith and he's saying, and I heard from so-and-so, who heard from so-and-so, who heard from so-and-so, who heard from so-and-so, who heard from so-and-so, that the Prophet ﷺ said, this. And then he goes to the next one. This is the teaching, right? It's not like he's telling stories and entertaining people and stuff. 5,000 people still come. Some of them were just seeking the blessing. Some of them were seeking to learn from the adab, so on and so forth. One person, he mentions one of Imam Ahmed's contemporaries. He says, I went to Abu Abdullah Ahmed ibn Hanbal 12 times. He knows, I went to his circle 12 times. And he was reading the Musnad to his sons. So he's reading, the Musnad is his collection of hadith. It's in the range of like 30,000-ish. It's a big collection. The Musnad of Imam Ahmed's a big collection. So he's teaching it to his sons. And the guy used to go, and he says he was reading the Musnad to his sons. I did not write a single hadith. I was just interested in his character and his adab. It's the only reason I would go. Just want to see him and see how he is, right? It seems that he had different circles, that he had a circle he would hold in his home for his sons, for people who are very close, and then also circles that he would hold in public. They say there's 3 major qualities that were there in his classes. The first one is that his gatherings were dominated by gravity, tranquility, humility, and calm. That there would not be joking, there would not be anything else going. It was very strict, very calm, very tranquil. He gives the knowledge, you take the knowledge. And it's said that even his contemporaries and even the other shuyukh, they knew that in Imam Ahmed's gathering, you don't joke around. So some sheikhs, everyone has different styles. Right? Like one of the things, with Egyptians always joke. So in Egypt, it's very rare to find shuyukh that teach without joking, or at least making fun of people. At least they'll make fun of people if they don't joke. But people have different, demeanors. But even his contemporaries, they knew you don't joke when Ahmed is around. So there's a story about Yazid ibn Harun, and he was teaching hadith. And it says that he joked with those with whom he was dictating. He's dictating the hadith, and he joked a little bit. And when he joked, Imam Ahmed cleared his throat. So the guy struck his forehead and he said, how come you didn't tell me Ahmed was here? If I knew he was here, I wouldn't have joked. So even his contemporaries, they didn't, they took it very seriously. The second thing about his classes is that they say he did not give lessons unless he was asked. He did not give lessons unless he was asked. This is another thing that you'll see from people of knowledge, is that they're not just going to give, it's not like they're in a hurry to talk. People of knowledge and piety and everything else, they're not like, I have to get it out. If people want it, they give it to them. If they don't want it, they don't give it to them. It's okay. And I say that Imam Ahmed used to do that, and he would teach from the book, to make sure that it's even more strong in its accuracy. Almost always he would teach from the text. It says that Imam Ahmed he would take, it says that he took books with him to the mosque in case people should ask him hadith. He was so strict about narrating from the book that sometimes he'd go to the masjid with it in case someone asked him. So if someone asks him, he can take out the book and he can start to teach from the book. Right? It doesn't have to be from his memory. The third characteristic is that the lessons were of 2 categories. The first was hadith and the second was fatwa. And in the hadith, people would write it down and they would keep it, right? But in fatwa, he didn't like for people to write down his opinions. He didn't like for people to write down his opinions. His point was basically, I'm teaching the fatwa so that people can learn the methodology of deriving from the hadith. And if they want to write something down, they should write the hadith down. Don't write down my opinion. And he used to actually prohibit his students from writing it down. It says that one time he heard that one of his students had taken his fatwas to Khurasan, and he told everyone else, he said, bear witness that I refute them. I take back those opinions. One time someone brought him a book with some of his fatwas written down in it. He threw it away. He said, I don't want to see this. He was very angry about it because he wanted to just be connected to the hadith. And then they asked him, do you write books on opinions and so on? He said, no, I don't do that. This was his thing. He doesn't do that. And they said, Ibn Mubarak says it. He told them, Ibn Mubarak didn't descend from heaven. He's a great man, but in the end, this is my position. I'm going to do what I think is right. He can do what he thinks is right. He didn't come from heaven, and I can still do this. His lifetime, his lifestyle was very, very humble, as we mentioned, and he eventually was faced with a great trial, which was the trial of the Mihna. In Arabic, it's called the Mihna, or the Inquisition. Essentially, in short, what happened, without getting into the details of it, but in short, what happened was that there was a Khalifa at that time, Al-Ma'mun, and Al-Ma'mun was very interested in issues of knowledge and so on, and he essentially took an opinion that the Quran was created. We don't want to get into the theology of it because it's kind of complicated, but he took this position that the Quran was created. And this was a position that the Mu'tazila held, which were a sect of Islamic theology in that time, and still some of their opinions exist up to today. So it was a position that the Mu'tazila held in contradiction to Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, you could say the majority of the Muslims. So he took this position and he forced it upon the people. So he was the Khalifa, he took this position and he forced it upon the people. And he basically demanded that the first stage was that anyone who didn't hold this opinion, they're fired from their position as a qadi, as a judge. Then the second thing that he did was anyone who, from the scholars who holds this position and doesn't give this position up, they need to be brought to him and they're going to force them by the sword to give up this position. People died along the way. Many people died in this inquisition. From the students of Imam al-Shafi'i al-Buwaiti, he died in this inquisition. Many people died. And Imam Ahmed didn't give up. He didn't give up, even though he was tortured under Al-Ma'mun. Al-Ma'mun died, and Al-Mu'tasim took his place. He also tortured him. Then he died, and Al-Wathiq took his place. Al-Wathiq he said, if I torture him anymore, basically, it's going to just increase how popular he is. So he put him on house arrest. And then he died. The fourth one came, and Imam Ahmed was free to teach again. So they tortured him actually for about 28 months. They would threaten him, and they would say that if he doesn't give up his position, so on and so forth, they would flog him and they would beat him until he would lose consciousness, say until the point where they would poke him with the sword and he wouldn't react, right? So they would beat him until he was unconscious, and then he would be unconscious like that. He would stay in prison and they would repeat it over and over again. This went on for 28 months, and they just basically said, this is not obviously working. We're not getting what we were hoping to get, and they sent him to be at home. But he was at home and he was so abused and hurt that he couldn't really do much. He couldn't teach and so on. Sometimes he would go to the masjid, but it was very hard. Eventually, this passed. His livelihood, it seems that he didn't have a whole lot, but that he would work in different places in different ways. That one of the things is that he would take the gleanings of the crops after harvest, which was permitted. So basically he would see that there's leftover crops after harvest, and he would go and he would collect these, and he would make a little bit of money, and he would continue to live off of it. The other way that he would make money is, like we said, that he would work as a porter. And he really didn't like to take donations from people. He really didn't like to borrow money from people and not pay it back. They say that one time he did take a loan for around 200 or 300 dirhams from someone who was a God-conscious person. Because you had to be careful who you take loans from, especially someone who's a scholar, a student of knowledge. So I had to be very careful who he took it from this person, and he went and he knew that that person's property was lawful, it was halal, and then he went to pay it back eventually, the man told him, Abu Abdullah, I did not give it to you intending to take it back from you. So the man said, basically, I gave you this loan with the intention that I'm not taking it back. And then Imam Ahmed said, and I only took it from you intending that I would repay you. And he gave him the money. Right? You had your intention, I have my intention. And he pays him back. He wouldn't take positions from the government, things like this. He didn't want to work as a qadi and all of these kind of things. And then they trying to get him to take these positions. So for example, it says that a Shafi'i came to Baghdad for the second time, and his school spread there, and Imam Ahmed stayed with him. And a Shafi'i found out that Ahmed had gone to Yemen to learn from Abdul Razak, was experiencing hardships, and he was asked to become a qadi. He was asked to choose a qadi, and Imam, he told him that you should do this, maybe it's a good idea, you can appoint Ahmed, and then he can learn the hadith from Abdul Razak while he's there, and everything will be fine. And then Imam Ahmed was offered the position, and he said no. And he said, I'm not taking these positions. If you keep asking me about them, like, I'm not going to come around anymore. Basically, I'm not doing it. So he was very particular about that he didn't want to be part of these things. And you'll see that there were different positions that people took historically. Some scholars took the position that they would work and they would take the judge route. Some of them they're not touching any of it. And especially you can see in the case of Imam Ahmed why he didn't want to touch it. As an interesting side story about how serious some of the great scholars took this, there's an amazing story from Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, rahimahullah, who was one of the great kind of like middle era scholars in Cairo. And Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, they had kept asking him to be the big judge, and he kept refusing. And they kept pushing him, so finally he told the governor. There's governors higher than the mayor, right? So he told the governor he agreed he'll take the position on the condition that no one ever asks, like they don't intervene in his affairs at all, right? So this was the principle, and this is, and sometimes how we have problems in our communities up to today, right? So the people of knowledge were always very particular that they are going to be unaligned. They're unaffiliated. I'm going to do what I think is right. And if it costs me consequences, it costs me, right? So he said, I'm not going, as long as you don't intervene, I'll take the position. So he takes the position. Then what happens is there's a very wealthy man who dies in Cairo, and he didn't have heirs. And the mayor was corrupt, and he wanted to get some of the money from this person who died. So the mayor said, he got someone else, he said, look, why don't you go to the judge and say that you're an heir to this person, and we'll pay someone to be the witness, and I'll be the witness, and then we'll get the money and we can share the money, right? It's basically, people in power stealing money. So he says they go to Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, the person who was paid by the mayor. He comes in front of him, he tells him, I'm the heir of so-and-so. He says, who are your witnesses? He says, one witness is this person, and he says, my other witness is the mayor. And Ibn Daqiq al-Eid tells him, okay, I need a witness that's reliable. And he says, the mayor to me is like عندنا, with us, he's reliable, right? Like us, the people, we consider him to be reliable. And Ibn Daqiq al-Eid, he recites a line of poetry to him. He says, they come to us and they say, with us, he's reliable, but who are you to have with in the first place? Meaning like, مَنْ أَنْتَ حَتَّى يَكُونَ لَكَ عِنْدُ. This is what it said, like, who are you that you can even make this statement that he's reliable in the first place? And he told him, get out of here. I'm not playing these games with you, and he kicked him out. Then it was later on, the mayor, a messenger came from the mayor to Ibn Daqiq in his courtroom, and he told him, the mayor requests that he can speak to you. So now, see, they're very sensitive, like you don't mess with justice in this case, and now you're trying to intervene. So he told him, get out of my courtroom and tell the mayor that I resigned from my position. And he closed the courthouse and he went home and he closed all of the doors in his home, and he sent messengers to all the other judges in the city. He told them, all of them, close your courts. He shut down the entire judicial system in Cairo. Shut down the entire judicial system. because he was messing with the independence of the court, the mayor. So then finally the news gets to the governor, right? Like, what's going on? He comes in, he requests to speak to him and so on and so forth. Then he goes to him, he tells him what happened, and they start to negotiate and whatever. And then the governor tells him, and the mayor is over here, why don't you make dua for him? He says, هذا لا يصلح لي شيء. Tells him, this guy, he's useless. Ibn Daqiq tells him, this guy, he's useless. Don't ask me to make dua for him. Like, he intervened in this issue. So they were very serious about this stuff. This is why Imam Ahmed didn't take the position. Okay? So I'm not having this this trial, of being associated with the government power at that time. It was said that Imam Ahmed, he had a great amount of knowledge, and people of his time, they would recognize him for this knowledge. So for example, Ali ibn al-Madini, who was a great scholar of that time in hadith, he was preceded Bukhari and Muslim in these figures. He says, there is no one among us who has a greater memory than Abu Abdullah ibn Hanbal. And I have known Abu Abdullah for 50 years and he is still increasing in good. So I've known him for 50 years and he's still getting better, right? So the knowledge, it ended with these people, and Imam Ahmed, he was a very big person there. They said he had a number of qualities. One of them, obviously, like we just said, was that he had a very strong memory. And he says that, for example, he says, once I was discussing the hadith of a Thawri with Waki', and after he prayed Isha, he would walk home from the mosque, and I used to talk with him then. Sometimes he gave 9 or 10 hadith, and I would memorize them. And when he entered, the students of hadith would say to me, dictate to us, so I dictated to them, and they wrote. So basically he's saying, I would walk home with the Shaykh, and he would give me 10 hadith, and I memorized them on the spot. And then he'd come into the class, and he would be able to dictate them. So his memory was very strong, and people knew that, and yet still he would still write it down. And they said that there was no one like him in terms of his knowledge. The second thing that he had of great qualities was that he was very steadfast. As we noticed, with his poverty, with the oppression that he faced, but he was very strong in the face of these difficulties, and he remained firm in the face of them. The third quality that he had was integrity. He used to make sure that his relationship with Allah is strong, that his word is reliable, that he wouldn't take money from other people, all these things that we mentioned. And he also put great emphasis on his asceticism, because it was a means by which he would soften his heart. So it wasn't just an intellectual exercise of writing hadith and memorizing things and stuff. It was an issue of the heart for him. So it said that one time someone came to him and they asked him, what makes the heart tender? He said, what makes the heart soft? And they say that Imam Ahmed was silent for some time. And then he said, my son, consumption of the lawful. Meaning, only put inside of you that which is halal. Only eat that which is halal. It will make your heart soft. So this is one of the things that he had said. And he talked also about the remembrance of Allah and so on. He loved friendship, and the friends that he knew, even though his life was very tough, when he would lose friends, that was a big deal to him. He used to say, when friends die, a man is brought low. So this is he used to be very close with the people that he was close with, and he used to take that, hold it very close to his heart. Which is something that's also important, because oftentimes you'll see people who are extremely dedicated to something and very successful in it, and that will result in them not being able to uphold relationships. But he was very dedicated to hadith, as we can see, but also people who were close to him, he held them very close, and people used to love him for that. Another thing that's said about him is that he also had sincerity. So this is, you can have knowledge, but it's sincerity that brings light to the knowledge. It illuminates it, and it brings it forth, and it brings it into action and into life. You don't seek this knowledge for debate. You don't seek this knowledge to show off. He used to say, displaying an inkwell is part of showing off. And he preferred that no one listened to him. And he said, I would like to settle in Mecca where I could lose myself in one of the ravines and so escape being recognized. Like, I wish I could go somewhere people wouldn't even recognize me. I could just do this work, this thing that I'm doing. Nobody recognize me, no one give me any praise, and I'll just keep going on. So this is a sign of sincerity, a very important sign of sincerity, that we don't look for praise for the things that we do. It's not so that we can attain some sort of accolade or be recognized as the person. They say that someone was accustomed to praying in the front row of prayer for years upon years. So it wasn't until he showed up late one day and he found himself in the second row that he realized that he actually used to like to be praised that he was in the front row. It's only when he wasn't there anymore he realized, oh, now I feel like they're not saying that I'm in the front row anymore, and so on and so forth. So not being recognized for the things we do is important. And of course he learned this from his teacher as well, Imam Shafi'i. Imam Shafi'i used to say, I wish people would take this knowledge and they forget where it came from. Like, they forget that it even came from me. So he learned this from his teacher. The fifth quality is that they say he had a natural authority. Some people are just like this. Some people just have a haiba. In Arabic it's haiba. Like, people, they're just impressive. Some people are just more impressive than other people. They intimidate more than other people. Not in a bad way, but you just look at them and you have awe. They say that he was awe-inspiring without causing fear, and he was greatly venerated and esteemed. The police were in awe of him, even when they passed by his house, because they said one of the police people, they would ask him to knock on his door in the evening for prayer, and he couldn't do it because he was so in awe of Imam Ahmed. So he would knock on his uncle's door, who was next door, and then it would reach him, right? So even the rulers, they had a tough time with him. One person said, I visited Ishaq ibn Ibrahim and other rulers, but I did not see anyone who inspired more awe than Ahmed ibn Hanbal. I went to speak to him about something and I began to tremble from awe when I saw him. So he was just a very impressive person. There was another one that was here. And that's not because necessarily, sometimes people think that that's because someone was just they carried themselves in a very powerful way. That's not what it is. Actually, this awe that we're talking about here is a gift that Allah gives to someone, that He puts awe in other people's hearts towards the person. So it says that in spite of his majestic presence, he was good company. He was not harsh or rude. He was very modest. Someone described him saying, I did not see anyone in the time of Ahmed who more combined religiousness, chastity, self-control, good manners, and noble character. He said they would say that he was modest. He often bowed his head and lowered his eyes. He would just very humble, bow his head, lower his eyes. It wasn't that he was trying to be like a power broker, I'm here type thing. It was just, he was there. He didn't have to do it. He just was, because Allah gave him that power. When he smiled at people, he would welcome them. He was very humble, and so on and so forth. So these are some of his stronger qualities. In the end, Imam Ahmed again is he's the fourth of the great imams. When we talk about the great imams, he's the fourth of the great imams. He's the last of those four who became the main figures of the different schools throughout history that would be passed down, that would be used in the courts, that everything else was from his opinions. Many of his opinions are actually written by his son. And a lot of the narrations, Abu Abdullah, because he's the father of Abdullah, his son Abdullah was one of them who really recorded his opinions. As we may have talked about in the beginning, the four imams, they were great figures. And they were figures that were very, very unique. But they lived in a time also of great figures. And this is something that we see. It's very interesting how environment impacts people. Every now and then you'll have an era where great people come up. Like if you think about, for example, in the 60s and 70s era, so many great people came out. Internationally, not even just in the United States. Internationally, there were so many things going on. And all these people came up. You'll see it in other parts of Muslim history, that like Ibn Daqiq al-Eid that I mentioned, and Al-Izz ibn Abd as-Salam, and Al-Qarafi, and Ibn Taymiyyah, and Ibn Qayyim, and like all of them were in this like 100 years, 200 years span, 300 years span. There was one, there's like this stretch where all of these luminaries popped up. In the time of the great imams, there were many, many great imams. And there are many others whose names we don't know, and many others whose works are less known. And they say that one of the reasons for that was because their students did not serve them the way that the imam's students serve them. So in the case of Abu Hanifa, Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani compiled his opinions. So we have now his opinions, and the students went through the madhab and they derived his methodology and so on. Imam al-Shafi'i, you also have great students who spent time with him and kept his madhab, and also he wrote. Imam Malik had these great students who were around him. Ahmed, similar, that people took the mantle of what he had taught. And so this is something that we see throughout history, that there's always tarakum al-ma'lumat, like there's one generation upon generation. People build knowledge and they refine it and they go through it, and then we always have these great figures. And the Prophet ﷺ, he promised us actually that upon every 100 years there will be those who revive the religion. Every 100 years that Allah will send people, person or group or set of people, to revive the religion of Islam. And so we have to keep this in mind also, because you may look at history and be like, oh, there's these ups and downs, but there's always a time when these ups come. And even when things look very bad, there's often amazing, amazing good that comes afterwards. So these four imams, we looked at their lives because their names come up so often, and we need to look at their lives in order to remember who they were and to get inspiration from the way that they lived. And inshallah, in the future, maybe we'll take other biographies and other things that we can gain inspiration from. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward them the best of rewards, and to help us to follow in the way that they have set forth. وصلى اللهم وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا والحمد لله رب العالمين. Anyone have any questions or comments about this? Yes. Oh. Mm-hmm. Do you mean Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, the fifth Khalifa? Okay. Um, so Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, where do I start with this? So when we say the four imams, usually this is a reference to Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi'i, Ahmed. But the four khulafa, the four khalifas, is Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, right? And then people will say that the fifth of the righteous khulafa is Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Actually, and generally speaking, Muslim history, even people who are somewhat anti-Umayyad, will accept that Umar ibn Abdul Aziz was a righteous ruler, and that he was a great man. And he, actually, there's really amazing stories from him. But as a point of technicality, it's probably more accurate if we call him the sixth of the righteous khulafa, because the fifth would be Al-Hasan ibn Ali, radiallahu anhu, the son of Ali, who was a khalifa for just a very small period before he stepped away from it. So he was the fifth really righteous Khalifa, and then Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. But Umar ibn Abdul Aziz is mostly agreed upon, in terms of his piety. Abul Hasan al-Nadwi included him, rahimahullah, Shaykh Abul Hasan al-Nadwi included him in his book Saviors of the Islamic Spirit. He's one of the first people he mentioned. Very beautiful biography also. Hmm. Yeah. So the question is that it said that Imam Ahmed used to. We mentioned that he made three of his pilgrimage, his Hajj on by foot, and that he used to face these hardships. And now you see people nowadays who are trying to go on foot, putting themselves through hardship and so on. Is this the right thing to do? Um, I think that one of the things that we often do as a people is that we take the inspirational exceptions to the norm, and then we all hold ourselves to that exception. So the general rule is that Allahu ghaniyun an ta'dhibika nafsak, that Allah is sufficient beyond you torturing yourself. Basically meaning that Allah is not in need of you putting yourself through extra hardship for no reason, right? If there's a hardship that Allah tests us with, we have patience, right? But Allah is not in need of us purposely making things difficult on ourselves. That's the general rule. Now, the thing is that there are people who are so strong in their iman and in their conviction that they push themselves farther than normal people push themselves. And the difficulty with that is that sometimes when the rest of us try that, we end up breaking ourselves. So someone may hear the story of Imam Ahmed going on pilgrimage by foot, and they're like, you know what, I'm going to make pilgrimage on foot. And they go and they make the pilgrimage on foot, and they have a terrible experience. Because they're not Imam Ahmed. We might not. So we have to be careful. My point is that we have to be careful sometimes when we read the biographies of amazing people, that they really went through sometimes very incredible trials. And it's not necessary that we ourselves have to expose ourselves to those trials. And that if Allah tests us with something, may He give us strength. But we don't. We should be careful about this thing. It can be very, very, very difficult. I mean, like I know, for example, even for for Americans, people who are born and raised here and stuff, or people who are used to living here, just going on the cheaper Hajj packet is enough of a fitna for many people. Let alone going on foot or anything else. So being not VIP is is enough of a trial for many people. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us. Inshallah. طيب, let's stop so we can make adhan and get ready for salah, inshallah. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam taslima kathira. Subhanallahi wa bihamdihi, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. كذبت قوم نوح المرسلين إذ قال لهم أخوهم نوح ألا تتقون إني لكم رسول أمين فاتقوا الله وأطيعون وما أسألكم عليه من أجر إن أجري إلا على رب العالمين فاتقوا الله وأطيعون. قالوا أنؤمن لك واتبعك الأرذلون قال وما علمي بما كانوا يعملون إن حسابهم إلا على ربي لو تشعرون وما أنا بطارد المؤمنين إن أنا إلا نذير مبين. قالوا لئن لم تنته يا نوح لتكونن من المرجومين قال رب إن قومي كذبون فافتح بيني وبينهم فتحا ونجني ومن معي من المؤمنين فأنجيناه ومن معه في الفلك المشحون ثم أغرقنا بعد الباقين إن في ذلك لآية وما كان أكثرهم مؤمنين وإن ربك لهو العزيز الرحيم. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. كذبت عاد المرسلين إذ قال لهم أخوهم هود ألا تتقون إني لكم رسول أمين فاتقوا الله وأطيعون وما أسألكم عليه من أجر إن أجري إلا على رب العالمين أتبنون بكل ريع آية تعبثون وتتخذون مصانع لعلكم تخلدون وإذا بطشتم جبارين فاتقوا الله وأطيعون واتقوا الذي أمدكم بما تعلمون أمدكم بأنعام وبنين وجنات وعيون إني أخاف عليكم عذاب يوم عظيم قالوا سواء علينا أوعظت أم لم تكن من الواعظين إن هذا إلا خلق الأولين وما نحن بمعذبين فكذبوه فأهلكناهم إن في ذلك لآية وما كان أكثرهم مؤمنين وإن ربك لهو العزيز الرحيم. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده.